Hey everybody, Jason Burmis here, and thank you guys for joining myself for what I hope to be a lesson for all those that think that Bill Barr is going to save us, that he's trustworthy, that he's not deep state, that he's not part of the very apparatus that you, the viewers, should be fighting against. You know, I took a pretty big hit yesterday in subscribers for telling the truth about what's going on in the Middle East. And I often hear that Bill Barr is going to take down the deep state and expose all of these nasty predator class that have manipulated our society and done evil things for so long. Well, I'm about to show you not a chance. And not only am I going to show you that, but what we're going to do is we're going to show you Bill Barr and what they were talking about Bill Barr when he was being nominated as Attorney General for George Herbert Walker Bush, and what his past really is. And we're largely going to rely on this talk show on C-SPAN with an LA Times journalist called Ronald Ostro. Now, he often whitewashes the situation. And the thing is that throughout this, what you're going to see is you're going to see Bill Barr is a career CIA guy. That's where he got his start, unabashedly. That George H.W. Bush, who was a career CIA guy, stacked his entire administration with CIA guys like him and like Gates on purpose to cover up the BCCI scandal, Iran-Contra, and if you think anything's changed, that this guy isn't a cover-up artist, you're wrong. So after we show you what is going to be a large breakdown of this, and then Joe Biden actually talking about Bill Barr like he's the best thing since sliced bread, like he's the next coming of Christmas. You're going to watch Joe Biden worship Bill Barr. In fact, so much so that there's not even a real vote on the floor for him to be Attorney General. There's not a roll call. It's the ayes have it. And we're going to show you that as well. Okay? And then we're going to show you all about, thank you so much, Bogus Hype, all about from Invisible Empire, what I'm talking about when you hear about these things from the late 80s, mid 80s, into the early 90s, into this confirmation hearing and what they mean. So this is going to be a long one, guys. Strap in for quite the live stream where we expose Bill Barr and the deep state. And we go deep. Bogus Hype says, I heard Soleimani was leading the Benghazi attack from Dave Jonda. I haven't seen, and I've seen those rumblings too. I got to tell you right now, I need some evidence before I find out he was running if he was running the Benghazi attacks. Okay, let's think about this. Do you think that we would have allowed him in Iraq, even with the backing of Russia, in Lebanon, etc.? No, I don't. Again, I'd have to see that. Okay, so once again, we're going to show you Bill Barr is as deep state as it gets. Okay, so this first clip we're going to play is a little long-winded. I might stop it once or twice, but there's a lot of stuff in here. But this is where Bill Barr comes from, the 41-year-old Attorney General under Pappy Bush. You ready? Let's do it.
Two younger attorneys general, Ramsey Clark and Robert Kennedy, and they each had obvious connections that led them to those posts. In a lot of ways, he's so unknown outside the Beltway here, outside of Washington, that he's the ultimate insider.
Unknown at the time, ultimate insider, career CIA.
He's the son of educators. He began his government career armed with bachelor's and master's degrees from Columbia in government. He began his career as a CIA careerist.
A CIA careerist, Columbia government, South America, where the arms dealing was going on. Not far away from that Contra activity, eh, Mr. Barr? Flick Off said, trolls are out in force to control the narrative. Good luck with them, Jason. Keep up the great work. Well, I'm not backing down to anybody, bro.
He was at the CIA for 4 years first. He worked in the area of the Chinese intelligence, and then he moved over into legislative affairs at a very delicate time when both the House and the Senate had special committees looking at what was regarded as CIA excesses. Then in came President Carter and a new CIA director, and meantime, all the time at the CIA, he had gone to night law school over here at George Washington University. And he graduated second in his class, by the way, while being a full-time CIA employee. He graduated second in his class of both day and night students.
So, just so everybody understands this guy is full-time CIA groomed and got his law degree while being CIA. That's who Bill Barr is.
He left the CIA to clerk for a conservative federal appeals judge here in Washington. And then from there, he went and with a then small 50-lawyer law firm in Washington, relatively small. But he had other opportunities. It's kind of indicative or...
Opportunities like in the future being on the law team for Epstein in some of those cases, by the way.
Symbolic of his career. He's always looking ahead. I think he thinks ahead as to what his moves will be. He chose a firm that was small and growing. It's Shaw Pittman. It's now grown to 250 lawyers.
Just so people understand, it was not Shaw Pittman that he did work for Epstein. I believe that was Kirkland and Ellis, but we'll continue.
At any rate, he went there for a couple years as an associate, and then he went over to the Reagan White House for about 82 to 83 in domestic policy staff. He went back to Shaw Pittman, became a partner. Then he worked in the transition from Reagan to Bush.
Now think about that too. Reagan was clearly losing his mind at the end. He was already a puppet president after that assassination attempt, right? That was connected to George H.W. Bush, by the way, okay? It's in my film Invisible Empire. We won't be playing that section because there's so much here. You're also going to find out how he worked with Robert Mueller to cover up these BCCI crimes in this. So gear up, man. And
he vetted vice presidential candidates as a lawyer, including Vice President Quayle. Turned out to be Vice President Quayle. Mm-hmm. And then he joined the Justice Department as the small, little-known, but very important post, Assistant Attorney General in charge of the Office of Legal Counsel, the Attorney General's lawyer, at the beginning of the Bush administration, April '89. He was in there about a year when then Attorney General Dick Thornburgh had a real crisis. He was in a downhill slide. He looked like he was out of control of the department. The deputy quit. His deputy quit. Barr took over as deputy and really helped restore the department back to a smooth running operation. But still, with all of that background, it's really impressive that someone at 41 could jump to that position of Attorney General.
So there you go. You got the young guy being brought up by the CIA, embedding himself in a time where there's a full transition of power of George H.W. Bush, who's already the vice president and the ex-director of the Central Intelligence Agency and a longtime operative, even though they don't tell you that in history, a family member, because, that's what Prescott Bush, his father, was, who helped create that out of the OSS, Project Paperclip, the Nazis, facts. Facts. Okay, so we're going to fast forward to the next clip here, because, some of these deep staters he was working with were people like Mueller at the time. So let's make sure we get right to where we need to be. Hopefully that's going to be close enough.
What's that about?
Well, as you know, that's probably the largest bank scandal to hit town in many a moon. And
this is BCCI.
He's going to be asked about why the Justice Department didn't move faster on obvious leads. I think it'll come out that in July he took charge of this and began pushing for more speed, and while all the attention is focused on Assistant Attorney General Robert Mueller, who heads the criminal division, I think it'll turn out that Barr had quite a role.
Oh, you mean Robert Mueller and Bill Barr helped cover up the BCCI banking scandal together? Oh, my goodness. My goodness. Well, that's not on the news. We got another great super chat. Mike Stachowski says, what do you think is going to happen with Iran? I feel that this is just fear porn and not going to go anywhere. Didn't last year start off with World War III? Let's hope not, man. I'm praying it doesn't pop off. I was happy it didn't pop off last year. I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball, but I can tell you right now, what's going on is not good. But let's continue. So did you just hear that? And I don't think a lot of you are going to understand the lengths of how messed up this BCCI scandal is until we actually play excerpts of Invisible Empire and New World Order Defined, which we're going to do. So you can see that chapter and see why, I feel like making documentary films is still an important art form, one that I want to continue to do. All right, so let's continue here to the next part that I got marked down. And right around... no, that's too much. Where do I want to go there? Sorry, guys. Sometimes when you do it live and we didn't edit it first... what are we doing? 2145.
It's his. But he'll be able to say that he is ordered to step up in the housing discrimination moves by the Civil Rights
I think this is the
Division.
Noriega
That will receive
stuff.
some attention, I think.
There is a sense that some of the stories about him, and there have been a lot of in-depth stories since the nomination, that he's something of the pride of the career bureaucrats. Is there
He is a
something
pride
to
of
that?
the career bureaucrats.
I think so, although, his careerist background is really those years at the CIA. But I think the reason he's the pride is that...
Think about that. He's the pride of the CIA and career bureaucrats. This is 1991. This is the technopoly. This is unelected people that are manipulating society on behalf of the predator class, controlling the narrative. But Bill Barr is going to fucking save the world.
In the recent budget go-around a year ago, it was William Barr who fought over at the White House at the OMB and got them to restore otherwise draconian cuts in Justice Department operations. And I think that's...
I mean, dude, come on. So let's continue here. This is where he mentions Neil Bush, because Neil Bush was heavily involved in that BCCI scandal. And yes, that's George Bush's son. It's one of the other George Bush's brother and Jeb Bush's brother. Neil, you don't hear a lot about Neil, but he's a little bit more important than people say. So let's jump to some Neil Bush here.
For an attorney general to issue a statement like that in the passing of a police chief, even one as famous as, or infamous, depending on your view, as a former chief of police Rizzo. But he did this because he had a Senate campaign, one which he lost in Pennsylvania going, and it just had an unseemly appearance. He did the same thing on the investigation of Neil Bush, the president's son. He was quick to rush to it appeared to observers, quick to rush to the judgment that there was no criminal aspect to this at all.
Of course! So here you are having this guy admit that Bill Barr decided way back in the day that George Bush's kid had no criminal charges on him in one of the biggest scams that we know involved his father, Iran-Contra. Are you listening to this? Are you starting to get the picture that the fix is in, that Bill Barr is not a good man? All right, let's jump a little further. Maybe this, I don't think we have done the Noriega stuff. But basically, Bill Barr was behind the idea that you could just go in to another country, kidnap who you want, and then imprison them. Pretty contested back in the day, especially because Noriega was one of our assets.
There's another point about like the Gates nomination. The same thing with there seems to be such a crossover between members of the CIA or people who've worked with the CIA and into our Justice Department. And well, what I want to decide was who watches the watchers, because the main watchword here is oversight. And what I want to cite as an example is the successful work of Dina Razor and her group, the Project for Military Procurement. It was a place that what they called closet patriots working inside the Pentagon could go and blow the whistle. And it led to the very successful operations called Operation Ill Wind that closed down on every single military contractor. We need a group that people can blow the whistle. I mean, I remember George Bush stating a couple of years ago that he will authorize some backing of whistleblowers. We need whistleblowers because the temptation for politicization is just too great, especially in election year.
But here's the thing. I hate to tell you. Whistleblowers, no. They didn't never encourage them. They always wanted to control them. And that's why this current one's not a real whistleblower. That's a whole different thing. And real whistleblowers, they're usually put in jail. They're Chelsea Manninged. Okay? That's the real deal. So let's continue on. Where's our next one? 3059. All right.
Thank you.
Mr. Ostro, I am exceedingly concerned, and I hope other people are. And I ask you because you've written about conspiracy and things in the past where a deck has been stacked too fully. Doesn't it concern you that this administration seems to bring to place people that not only don't have any disagreeable or opinions other than they seem to want to foster, but their record seems to be right straight down the line. You mentioned the
no dissent
of the situation with Noriega, and that that was kind of something that he did, and he's had a lot of experience with the CIA and so on. And I have to confess that this is Mr. Barr has completely escaped my my viewing of this of any of his career before this. But I don't like the fact that almost everything you've mentioned so far, to his credit, and it seems to be right along the lines. Don't we want people with some other ideas? Don't we want some people with some other views?
Caller, is it your point that he's just very conservative?
Oh, no, not at all. Not at all.
Authoritarian.
Conservatism doesn't bother me. Conservatism with a online situation with the administration right down the line bothers me, because I think we should be having some people who are willing to say, Mr. President or other members of this administration, maybe we should look at the other side of this coin.
Okay, I see.
Same side.
All right, I was a little bit confused.
Yes, you were. You were extremely confused. I must have skipped over the Noriega stuff, but as you can see, he mentions it in passing there, and the fact that, again, Bill Barr was the one that said, hey, we can just go, kidnap somebody. No big deal.
On Mr. Barr, it's his job and duty to take action on civil rights, not only of federal officials, but also as far as citizens. And he does not have a clean record as far as there's a case that's Cedillo versus United States where Mr. Barr has not taken action.
Caller, what's the name of that case?
Cedillo versus the United States.
And you say he has not taken action.
That is correct.
What are the facts of that case?
A federal judge has violated the constitutional rights to an individual and has blocked him from due process of law.
And, he goes on that, there are many cases of that, and it's just a microcosm for basically exposing them. And let's go to this one here.
What went on behind the scenes.
Redondo Beach, California is next. Go ahead.
Good morning. I was wondering if your guest could refresh our memory on the Ed Meese fiascos. He seems to be on TV every day recently, debunking Gary's 6 October surprise book, and no one seems to be questioning his truthfulness and integrity, and bringing up the fact that he may have been selling government jobs to get his mortgage relief in his house in California, and his friends at WedTech. Just wondering why everyone seems to have forgotten his lack of truthfulness on those things, and now he seems to be the Reagan spokesman for October Surprise.
Well, on October Surprise, I think he's the Reagan spokesman because he was at the center of the initial, quote, investigation, unquote. He's the one who announced what they had discovered about the diversion at the White House that fateful day. The allegations that the viewer mentions were examined by an independent counsel, and there was found to be substance to some of them, but by that time he was about out of office.
See that? Even though they whitewashed that, I want people to understand what he's talking about. That's where the hostages were held in order to ensure that Jimmy Carter wouldn't be elected, and our Central Intelligence Agency was involved.
And the independent counsel at the time came to the conclusion that what violations he found were largely technical violations.
I think part of the point of the caller was also, now that he's out front on this issue, there doesn't seem to be any questioning of his credibility, and that the media may not be pointing it out.
Exactly. And they're still not pointing it out today. And there are still people that believe, again, Bill Barr is going to save everybody. Bogus Hype, I saw you asking whether Bill Barr was part of some kind of a pedo death cult. No, I don't believe so, but I can tell you this. If you look at what happened with BCCI, yeah, there's some bad things. There's some bad things with Bill Clinton there. Bill Clinton running that CIA cocaine through Mena, Arkansas. But we'll get there. Don't worry. This is going to be a long stream. And not only that, if that wasn't enough, what else did Bill Barr help cover up? How about the Promise software? Let's go all the way into, like, you know, Robert Maxwell and selling that off, and Inslaw. Yeah, he was involved in whitewashing that too. I think that's going to be the final clip on this one. Then we'll get to Joey B telling you how great he is, because everybody loves Joey B, Joe Biden, and Joe Biden loves Bill Barr.
A Republican president is running a sub rosa government effort someplace. You know, with Nixon it was Watergate, and then there's Iran-Gate, and then there's now this connection with the BCCI. Isn't it possible that we are getting into the bureaucracy, a bunch of people who are committed more to the Republican philosophy and pushing forward Republican programs?
See, I would just say it's authoritarian.
A lot of interest in, you know, what's best for the country or what the people want. Isn't there right now in Justice Department an effort to sort of subvert the BCCI investigation?
Carl, you believe there's an organized effort to that effect?
Yes.
Do I believe there is?
Yeah.
Well, you know, it seems that every time news breaks, practically, there are a group of people from, you know, Casey and
he's talking about William Casey,
operating in some part of the world on some program that the people have no knowledge of, and
CIA.
You know, that's usually in keeping with Republican philosophy. Just for example, in the Gates hearings, I heard about an effort to make it appear that the Pope was assassinated by somebody who the Republicans wanted to be guilty.
All right. Do you see any credence in that, Ronald Ostro?
On the BCCI question, I think it falls of its own weight, because those implicated so far, if implicated, that's too strong a word, those alleged to have perhaps done something wrong in BCCI have been leading Democrats. I mean, it remains to be seen how BCCI turns out. It's true there's 4 grand juries going now on the case. It's also true that the Justice Department...
So it's going to stop this. Now I want to show you...
Department President nominated.
This is his nomination. This is when Joey B gets to tell you how much he loves William Barr and kind of joke about the BC... You know, I mean, there is the BCCI scandal. There's a point where he laughs about it. Okay? This is your career deep state politician pushing another career deep state politician. It's the WW motherfucking F, baby, and not the World Wildlife Foundation. We're talking about pro wrestling.
First and foremost to the Constitution and the laws of this country, as we all know. This responsibility tempers his loyalty to the president that he or she may serve. And unlike the White House counsel, the Attorney General answers to the president alone. The White House counsel answers the president alone. The Attorney General does not answer to the president alone. He also answers to the public and to the institutions of government as well. Throughout his career of public service, William Barr has acted to protect and enhance the authority of the executive. As Attorney General, however, Mr. Barr must distinguish the interest of the president from those of the public, and he must respect the separate, though complementary, powers of the 3 branches of government. Based on my contacts with Mr. Barr, both before and during his testimony at the Judiciary Committee hearings on his nomination, I believe that Mr. Barr understands and is committed to the dual responsibility of the Office of Attorney General. At the recent hearings on his nomination, I asked Mr. Barr about his view of the doctrine of separation of powers, and we discussed several areas where the exercise of power has caused tension between the executive and the legislative branches. We discussed, among other things, powers like the power to make war, a power the Constitution divides between the executive and legislative branches. The responsibility and authority of each branch is distinct. Congress is to declare war. The President, as Commander-in-Chief, may then conduct war. But although the roles are separate, the power is shared, and each branch must act to take the country into war.
Not anymore.
Mr. Barr agreed that the Constitution assigns war-making powers jointly to the Congress and the President. He acknowledged that the President cannot initiate an offensive action, and even where the President has latitude to respond where lives are at stake or vital interests of Americans are threatened, his authority is provisional, and I quote, provisional, because it is always subject to Congress's exercise of power.
Let's stop that. Do you hear what he just said? First of all, Bill Barr's the Attorney General now. And we just had a military strike again that Congress didn't vote on. And we've been doing it now for almost 20 motherfucking years with this guy's help behind me. This traitor's help behind me. He sits there and he's spouting off about the executive branch having to wait for Congress's permission to go into war. And then he's meeting with one of the financiers of 9/11. He's kissing some Barr ass right here. Think about that. Think about it.
End of quote. That's from the hearing record. This testimony indicates to me that Mr. Barr recognizes that Congress and the President must be united in the decision to commit substantial forces to armed hostilities abroad. And it reveals he understands the separate but shared nature of the war-making power.
No, he doesn't.
Mr. Barr was similarly reassuring when asked about other issues of executive authority. For example, he admitted that as a matter of policy, he would like to see the President have a line-item veto. Nonetheless, he continued, after carefully reviewing the issue, he, quote, found no basis for an inherent line-item veto in the Constitution, end of quote. On other questions of executive privilege, Mr. Barr said he believes Congress, quote, has a legitimate interest in seeking information, end of quote, and that, quote, our policy should be one of maximum accommodation, end of quote, referring to the policy of the Attorney General's office, the Justice Department. And he put this policy into practice, noting that he negotiated a compromise or accommodation on every request for information he handled while head of the Office of Legal Counsel. He also said he expects and accepts the Supreme Court's decision on Morrison v. Olson, and that he would support a reauthorization of the independent counsel statute when it expires next year. These specific examples give weight to Mr. Barr's testimony that, quote, his loyalty is to the separation of powers and the system.
Clearly it's not, by the way.
And that his approach is to examine a claim of authority by, quote, taking the politics out of it, end of quote.
And putting the CIA politics into it. That's what this is. Remember Pompeo yesterday, the video? We lied, we cheated, we stole. There were entire courses on it at the CIA. And that's what Barr is. He's a career CIA guy. And, you know, Joey B is going to acknowledge there's some questions about BCCI and how, you know, they've kind of drugged their feet into that investigations. But he'll laugh about it, and it'll be okay. And there won't need to be a roll call because the ayes have it.
While there is ambiguity about the Constitution, what the Constitution envisions, Mr. Barr would undoubtedly, where there is ambiguity about what the Constitution envisions, Mr. Barr undoubtedly will continue to assert a broad executive authority. I may disagree with his interpretation of executive power in certain of these instances, but Mr. Barr does not unreasonably seek to create ambiguity where none exists. And he expressed a commitment to defending the Constitution's division of power between the branches of government,
sure he did,
even where he personally may desire that the powers were allocated differently. In my view, this commitment to the public interest above all else is a critical attribute in an Attorney General, and I will vote to confirm Mr. Barr. Two other subjects merit brief mention. First, Mr. Barr stated that he believes the court's decision in Roe v. Wade is incorrect as a matter of constitutional interpretation and should be overruled. Such candor has unfortunately become quite rare on the part of administration nominees. Again, I disagree with Mr. Barr's conclusion, but he has been nominated to a position in the executive branch, not the federal judiciary. And in choosing members of the third independent branch of government, the Senate need not defer to the President's selection of nominees who share his ideology. In contrast, the executive branch nominees will serve in the President's administration and must implement his policies. It is therefore appropriate, in my view, that for the Senate to accommodate, within reason, the President's desire to have individuals who share his views confirmed for executive branch positions. And finally, before I yield to my colleague from South Carolina, I want to comment on the subject which Mr. Barr received the most questions on during the hearing, and that is the Justice Department's handling of the BCCI investigation. As I stated at the hearing, I'm concerned that the department is too slow in appreciating the seriousness and the scope of BCCI's wrongdoing. According to Mr. Barr, the department essentially assumed the role of a reactive one, responding to the worldwide shutdown of BCCI and press reports of alleged wrongdoing, realizing the significance of the multiple pieces of the investigation only in the summer of 1991. This, in my view, is not acceptable and happened on the watch of the last Attorney General. The Department of Justice and other federal agencies must be in a position to size up the nature of a problem, to coordinate getting information to the appropriate agencies, and to act proactively before, not after, the illegality has spiraled into historic proportions.
It already did.
But this is not the question before us today. We will face that question with the Attorney General in the months to come in seeking to determine how the department can improve its operations to avoid future investigative failures under the new Attorney General. Today, the question is whether Mr. Barr should be confirmed to be Attorney General. And I'm aware of no evidence that suggests that Mr. Barr acted in a way to delay or obstruct the investigation of BCCI.
Oh, it's funny. No, he did.
While I'm concerned...
I'm going to stop it there. He did obstruct the investigation. He used the cover-up crew. Bill Barr is the cover-up crew on this, which we're about to watch right there. Joey B thought it was funny. I don't think it's funny. Here we go.
In conjunction with the military-industrial complex they had erected, a modern arm of this organization was exposed in what came to be known as the Iran-Contra Scandal. Essentially, black operations were not only caught dealing arms illegally and supporting South American dictators, but also smuggling drugs into the United States.
Iran-Contra was really the merging of two different programs. The first one was support for the Contras, who were, let's face it, a force of terrorists in Nicaragua trying to overthrow the Sandinista government. They were being secretly supported by the CIA, and at the bottom of the whole thing was drugs.
Iran-Contra was openly exposed by massive network coverage.
How was it that in 3 years, a network Washington set up to run arms to the Contras wound up running cocaine into this country for the most vicious drug cartel in the world? At the same time, we were supposed to be fighting a war against drugs.
But by the same token, I also smuggled my share of weapons in exchange for those illegal substances, with the full knowledge and assistance of both the DEA and CIA.
Betzner says that in 1983 he flew weapons from Florida to El Salvador and drugs from Colombia to the Bahamas on the way back. In 1984, he says, he flew twice from Florida to Costa Rica and back.
We could bring back our own cargo, and they would arrange it, or we could bring back their cargo without ever having to worry about interception, arrest, anything like this, that everything was taken care of.
What kind of cargo were you talking about?
Drugs.
Tolliver says he had 2 meetings with this man, CIA veteran Rafael Quintero. Then in March of 1986, he says he flew 14 tons of weapons down to Honduras, to this Contra resupply base set up by the CIA.
We take off from Tegucigalpa, Honduras, and we leave.
To?
South Florida.
Where in South Florida?
We landed at Homestead.
Homestead
Air Force Base.
This is the plane Tolliver says he used. The plane traces to a company that had a State Department contract to fly humanitarian supplies to the Contras. In addition,
It's always humanitarian aid, by the way. Yeah, no, it's always under the guise of good, okay? And that's how they use banking, BCCI, to smuggle it. And they bring in Barr to obfuscate Neil Bush and his role in all of that.
To that, 3 dozen sources confirm the basic scheme.
Oh, 3
We
dozen.
can now report that long before that operation began, there was another operation to provide guns for the Contras, which was also against the law. In this operation, Americans and Israelis provided arms to the Contras, and then the same network smuggled drugs into the United States.
The operation was launched in spring of 1983 at Washington's request, with at least $20 million of Israeli government money later reimbursed, we're told, from U.S. Covert Operations Fund.
For about 5 years, people were flying arms into Iran, and most of them came from Israel.
The Israelis purchased the weapons from Poland and Czechoslovakia and began shipping them secretly from Yugoslavia to Bolivia and then to Panama.
Adnan Khashoggi,
the
anybody?
Israeli liaison man there, this man, Michael Harari, until recently a close aide to Panama's strongman, General Manuel Noriega.
The guy Barr said
bring
go
the ship
get.
into Colombia, you would load drugs aboard it, and you would bring those drugs back to Panama with you. But bringing that stuff into the United States, that was something else. I've never been so thoroughly disgusted with myself in my life.
This network would also be involved in the October surprise.
Oh!
We really can't understand that unless we understand the so-called October surprise in the 1980 election, which is, I think, unquestionably Republicans, including William Casey, who later became Reagan's head of the CIA, negotiated with the Iranians for them not to release the hostages which were being held in Iran to Carter, but to wait until the Carter was defeated and the Republicans were in.
So Bill Barr covered that up. Erica Jill, thank you so much for the #1 sticker. You're #1. But here you go. I mean, now you're seeing like this whole network. You're seeing pieces of the Iran-Contra scandal that Bill Barr helped cover up. There's more, don't worry.
That is what actually happened, that the hostages were only released on the day that Carter left office and Reagan came in.
Unbelievably, this same network would even be linked to the BCCI banking scandal by journalist Danny Casolaro.
Oh, BCCI.
Casolaro was probing a conspiracy he called the Octopus, which involved the Iranian hostage crisis, the Iran-Contra affair, with, believe it or not, all funds channeled through BCCI, the international bank charged with everything from money laundering to fraud.
BCCI, it's a shadowy international bank linked to terrorists, drug runners, and dictators.
Little was known about BCCI until 6 of its top officers were arrested in Tampa in October of 1988 on charges of laundering drug money for Colombian cocaine bosses. The BCCI men were convicted, and the bank itself pleaded guilty. But for some reason, the bank was allowed to continue to operate all over the world.
There are indications that some of the reluctance to prosecute this bank stem from the favors it did.
For?
The favors it did for intelligence services everywhere. Too many secrets of too many countries, too many prominent people, too many hands-on, and that makes it desirable that this entire affair be forgotten.
It began to become clear that the global traffic of drugs were funding violent dictators, rigging elections, supporting the arms trade, and enforcing the assassination of anyone who got in the way.
Epstein network, anyone?
Casolaro was found dead for his efforts in exposing this network. His death, of course, ruled a suicide.
He was meeting a source in West Virginia. He was about to discover all. Instead, his body was discovered in a hotel room with 12 slashes in his wrist, but when the local authorities ruled it suicide, the family said, no way. The housekeeper had taken calls threatening his life.
And I pick it up telephone, I say hello, and he say to me, you son of a bitch, you's dead.
Casolaro would not be the only person involved in the scandal to wind up in a casket.
No, he wouldn't.
Meet Barry Seal. At first, the media portrayed Seal as a drug dealer gone good, who was assassinated by the Colombian mafia.
Authorities believe last night's machine gun killing of top drug informant Barry Seal was ordered by drug bosses in Medellin, Colombia, who sent 5 men to Baton Rouge to kill Seal.
Sam Dalton was the lawyer that represented the Colombian hitmen convicted of his assassination. We were trying to subpoena the CIA because we felt like they had documents, exhibits, and evidence that would indicate complicity in Seal's assassination. When they were able to gain access of Barry Seal's trunk the night of the murder, the personal phone number of none other than George H.W. Bush was present.
Oh!
Louis Unglesby, the former attorney for Mr. Seal, also confirms that he once called the office of the vice president after Seal had given him the number. You see, the Black Ops drug smuggling operation had not yet been exposed, and intelligence couldn't take any chances. It was later revealed that Seal was involved in smuggling cocaine into Mena, Arkansas,
Where?
while Bill Clinton sat as governor.
1983, Ronald Reagan was president, Bill Clinton was governor, and little Mena, Arkansas changed from a quiet town to a center for drug smuggling and reported Contra support activity. In the middle of it all, this man, admitted dope smuggler Barry Seal.
Let's stop it there for a second. Do you get how it's not about right and left? Do you get this is how Clinton got promoted from Arkansas governor to presidential candidate to president? He's running fucking drugs for the CIA and the Bush crime cartel, and the cleanup crew comes in Bill Barr style. And here we are, 35, 40 years later, same networks running the show. Deep State is for real.
Arkansas State Trooper Russell Welch investigated Seal's organization.
Each trip would have 250 to 350 pounds of cocaine.
According to the London Telegraph, Arkansas State Trooper Larry Patterson testified under oath that he and his officers discussed repeatedly in Clinton's presence the large quantities of drugs being flown into Mena Airport, large quantities of money, large quantities of guns. Hot Springs police officers would also record Roger Clinton, Bill's brother, during a cocaine transaction stating, "Gotta get some for my brother. He's got a nose like a vacuum cleaner." There was also a large amount of money laundering going on in Mena.
Former IRS agent William Duncan traced some of Seal's drug profits laundered through Mena banks.
We had direct testimony from people who were involved in the money laundering operation. We had testimony from people at banks who observed the transactions.
What happened when you tried to make this case before a grand jury?
I was never asked to present the evidence to a grand jury, ever.
This very same network used BCCI to fund the Afghani rebels.
The deputy director of the CIA, Richard Kerr, said late today that the CIA did use the Bank of Credit and Commerce International, BCCI, to support CIA activities overseas.
Most people still believe that the Soviets had maliciously invaded Afghanistan in order to spread their communist agenda.
The Al-Qaeda was essentially a kind of a byproduct of Brzezinski's campaign to embarrass the Soviet Union in Afghanistan. They weren't in Afghanistan at that time. Brzezinski boasted later that he was responsible for drawing them into Afghanistan. And he did this extraordinary interview with Le Nouvel Observateur in France, and they said, "But aren't you worried that you've created this whole new force of Al-Qaeda?" And he said, "Oh, what's more important, a few crazed Islamists or the fall of the Berlin Wall?" And they said, "But you know, is there no danger? Aren't they dangerous?" And he said, "Nonsense." He said all this in 1998. So I knew Brzezinski at McGill University. We were students together and took very small classes together. And in some ways he's bright, and in some ways he's kind of nuts. And he had the kind of nuttiness that made him attractive to the Rockefellers.
Bin Laden and his network were actually funded by BCCI through U.S. covert operations.
Well, the reason I bring it up, if you've ever heard any of our call-in shows, you know that we have people that think about the conspiracy theories of people like you. You would be a poster child for these people because you have served on the board of the Council on Foreign Relations. You helped start the Trilateral Commission, and you've been to the Bilderberger Group. Are people too close in this world, people in business, too close to the governments?
Well, you know, there is such a thing as insidious influence. And the question is, how does it operate? Does it involve bribery? And does it involve some sort of psychological domination of individuals? I don't believe in this notion of some sort of secret societies controlling people. But of course, in any political system, there are sort of over-the-table and under-the-table arrangements.
Under-the-table arrangements through BCCI that would lead us to a network that you just saw was linked to not only what? Iran-Contra, okay? The October surprise, obviously, in there. Arms dealing, drug running, the Mujahideen, Al-Qaeda, 9/11. And that's why we're doing this video, man. Bill Barr, CIA. We're getting nothing but a whitewash with that investigation. He's already told us Epstein killed himself. And if you were with us for the last 15 or so minutes, and you were checking that out, by the way, thumbs this video up, sub and share if you're new to the Burmese Brigade. That excerpt was from my film Invisible Empire, A New World Order Defined. And you can watch that free along with all my other films here. And I want to say, Bogus Hype, I appreciate your support. You're a big supporter of this channel. I'm just telling you right now, that guy is a career intelligence man. And, you know, you could talk about, you can make it black and white, like there's a good part of the CIA and a bad part of the CIA, or there's a lot of gray area inside there as well. And he's a Bush disciple, man. And I'm telling you right now, George H.W. Bush is as intelligence deep state as it gets. Bill Barr, in my opinion, has shown us not to be his friend many, many times. I really do respect the work of Whitney Webb on this subject. And look, just like if I tell the truth about what went down in the Middle East this week, and I will continue to, and I have to lose subscribers, that's fine. I want to grow this channel badly. I want more and more people to see the truth. That's real. But I'm not going to compromise what the truth is. And I'm not going to adjust my position or the facts to fit some bullshit narrative. Ever. So, if you appreciate that, guys, thumbs this up, sub and share, join the Burmese Brigade. I want to get to 40K. I want to get to 50K. But if we got to drop to 20K, that's fine. If I got to lose more than half my audience, that's fine. Because I'm not here to pander. You know, I will look at all sides of the issues. I read a lot of the insights. I check out leads that are given to me, and I focus on what's real. So, you know, if you like my work and you believe in it, you know, not only thumbs up, sub, and share, financially support me. I do it one way. It's a GoFundMe. No subscribe star, no Patreon, none of that stuff. Just this $5, $10, $15. It really does mean the world to me. And if you want to help me out, go check out this thread I've got on Conor McGregor. If you haven't heard, there's a plethora of evidence. Over a year ago, he violently raped a woman in front of witnesses. Beat her, too. This woman's already turned down $1 million. Complete blackout in U.S. media, and they're trying to let this guy fight in just over 2 weeks. Don't believe me. Go check this out and retweet it. Get it out there. It's getting some traction. If people actually look at the evidence I present, there's no doubt that it's overwhelming. Bogus Hope says, all we can do is keep spreading the info. I appreciate you, man. I absolutely do. And I appreciate that $10 super chat there, Grant Roger. So, guys, if you're into truth like me, that's the other way that you can help me out. You go to @JasonBurmis at some point. You check this thread out. I'm not asking you to retweet anything you don't agree with. But again, when you see that thread and the amount of evidence that somebody that's going to make WME Entertainment, Disney, ESPN, the UFC, and all these big Leviathan corporations, hundreds of millions, if not $1 billion on this next fight through all the merchandising, maybe we don't want to let that happen. Maybe we'd rather see this guy behind bars for the vicious crime that he's committed. And maybe we can just get a little win versus the global hypocrisy we seem to be seeing on all sides. I love you guys, and I'll see you on the flip side.